dealers had a monopoly and were raking it in. The artists mostly made enough to keep making art and funding their own habits and indulgences. Art dealers were notoriously unsympathetic to an addict's cash flow problems. The consequences of non-payment to a dealer for art were sufficiently ruthless and swift that defaulting was rarely an issue. Today, however, non-payment was the issue monopolising Nick's thoughts. Nick was panicking. He couldn't focus. His hearing became distorted and his vision blurred. It felt like he just had a huge hit of art. With all thoughts and emotions exhausted, the fact remained Nick Oden couldn't pay. Phased, walking hazily round with a summer day's heat blazing lazily down until reprieve found under shade of the last tree in Romtown, Nick paused, enslaved by his thoughts. To pay or not to be, that was the option. The notion made his stomach tense up, and upon release a realisation which focused his attention. Nick needed a Brad Pitt damn quick. The Golden Lion public house was the closest destination in which to manifest his colon's destined vocation. Nick made haste, making his way to the place where his post-intestinal digestive insides could shine in all their glory and expel their waste. He sat down and assumed that frown until, voicing that sound, the fat brown splashed down. As he reached for the roll of old recycled tree skin destined for the bowl that his fingers distinctly weren't feeling, his heart turned cold. Shit, thought Nick, no paper. He could see the irony. All day he'd been worried about having no paper with which to pay. Now sat here he had no paper with which to clear a different kind of shit away. As he pondered his predicament, he mused, whilst wandering round his mind cave for things that could be used, that he didn't think he'd ever read a book or seen a film where the main character had stopped to have a poo. The solution was found in Nick's shoe. He used his sock. Then from out the blue, Nick knew what he had to do. In the end, with neither lover nor friend to depend on, or a penny to spend, Nick caved. In the previous part of his history, Nick had mastered the dark arts. In the past, Nick had himself been an artist. The last time Nick partook in this task, he promised himself it'd be the last time Nick partook in this task. It was a dangerous game. The main artist, supplying the biggest art dealers in Romtown, had a system for dealing with other artists trying to muscle in on their craft. If you saw a man walking past in Romtown with both hands and each individual finger in splints, bandages and plaster casts, you knew he'd fallen foul of a bigger artist's wrath. It had occurred to him more than once previously that the old halfway house has still not been occupied, its contents conveniently still in situ. Nick still had keys. Nick knew a handful of low-level artists from outside Romtown who occasionally popped down to unload some of their sculptured rock. Now, the question was, who could he trust to help him create art from the dust? Speed and stealth were required, which discounted the flamboyant antics of Mr. P, who, ferocious in his tenacity for public attention, was a grade A liability. This was a shame because his art was always well received and commanded a better price than the local Dagenham soapbox schemes. Nick continued to tick more names off his imaginary list until only a lonely last candidate existed. His old mate Chris did bits and pieces of naughty sub-legal business and was known to take big risks. At first Nick resisted. Chris was a bit too dodgy for his liking, but this was a crisis of Heisenbergian proportions, requiring Nick's corporal capacity to distort elastically beyond the usual mortal confines of the sum of 1 + 1 and satisfying hunger. To tune his mind to Kerouac's Golden Eternal. He had the solution burning inside him, but making it work would take much reflection and planning, plus it was fucking frightening. However, Nick's hope, focused by the ever-present notion of what was in store for him in a direction he didn't take, was the only slack in the rope that could save his neck when the trapdoor opened. Nick held his breath as he dialed Chris's number into his phone. That Chinese water garden sound, distinctive. The mountain stream pouring down from heaven into a pooled lake at ground level, splashing, bubbling, gurgling, the continuous plop of infinite drops, calming, soothing, nature's music. Chris was taking a piss. He let his phone ring off. He shook and put away his cock, zipped up quickly, wiped the splashes of wee off his fingertips on his hips and checked his phone to see whose call he'd missed. It was Nick. Swift as a wave of social media grief, Bathed in a counterlogical disbelief when a famous drug-addicted celebrity dies tragically, Chris's phone's dial-back function intuited what his reaction would be and automatically dialed the last number it had received. By the time Chris had his ear next to the phone speaker, he was already hearing the familiar tones of his old homie Nick speaking. Hello? Hello? Chris? Yeah, it's me. For the next 6 minutes, Chris listened while Nick delivered his proposition in a deceitfully calm manner. The plan was to use the old halfway house to make art to take out for an underground network using Chris's expertise. One time around, then Nick would cash out, get far away from Romtown and forget all about art, dealers, debts, doubts, maybe get a house and a bird, but he couldn't think about that now. Chris liked the idea in principle. It was simple and they had all the tools and resources needed to complete it all, so he suggested they meet later that week. Nick insisted they met today. Chris sensed desperation which activated an instinctive hesitation in his brain, but Nick was a mate, so he agreed it should be okay and that he'd see him later in the line about 8. The time was 7:54. Nick's eyes were fixed on the door. He sat in the back in a booth away from the music, concealed from that big dog Nathan who knew the dealer Nick owed money to. Nick was scared. His go-to emotional state prepared to come into play. As ever, when he was stressed, his brain regressed. Nick didn't fear death. He didn't believe there was anything the other side of death to fear. He didn't welcome it, however, when it came near. He feared pain. A few of his friends had died, retiring to the dust from whence they came. Misapplied lives, trying and dying to get by, ending in that common way. Bones in a grave, a headstone, a name and 2 dates. At 8:04, Nick's accomplice Chris, 4 minutes late, walked through the door, scanning thoughtfully, his eyes sweeping the floor expectantly, nicely surprised when he saw Nick had bought a pint of best for him. It was a fine night. The full moon was high and the stars quite bright, almost sparkling in the crisp, clear sky. To still one's mind, to slow down one's propulsion, to contemplate the moon, lonely and in love, never to see his significant other, the sun, burning, his cold face shielded by the earth, ever yearning, never having the warm comfort of her, the sun's company, never knowing she was only half a turn away, a dream unrealised, to be together in the same sky at the same time of day. If Nick had thought to turn his eyes skywards, he might have been inspired, compelled to live his life with a higher purpose, to use his mind further. Instead, Nick, imprisoned by his fear and his addiction, remained in a pub, remained in the past, remained worthless. The beautiful and ancient muse of heavenly jewels, bathed in light, wouldn't save Nick's sick life tonight. Alright, said Chris, if I agree to this, are we talking 50-50 split? Of course, said Nick. Only thing is, you'll have to shift it quick for me. That might be tricky, said Chris. I'll have to take more risks, so maybe more like 60-40. Okay, fine, said Nick, ever one to miss a trick, especially when it came to pennies in his purse, so he was keen to settle before he talked his way into making his pay worse. The execution was booked for midnight. Nick had time to kill. With a grand plan and time in his hands, Nick hardly noticed the itch until he felt the sweat drip from his nose to his lip. Nick knew you always looked sick to the medicine makers who were quick to take your money and make you poor for a fix of feeling better but not offer a cure. As soon as he recognised the cluck for art, he felt a strain on his heart, and then it started. His eyes widened, pupils dilated, increasing in size at the same time and same rate as the self-hatred. He had to leave this place before the sweat drenched his face, so he stopped pacing and raced for the door. Without conscious thought, he headed out to score, needing a leveller before he descended any more. Nick had a rapport with Claire, an artist whose draw was fair, though her paint ain't and her sculpture's nasty, who supplied Nick on tip because he made a point of paying back pretty fast. Nick was almost running by the time he got there. He did the do with Claire and drifted lightly back into the night with a vacant stare. Inspired as ever by the art he'd consumed, he got clever and resumed his endeavour. It was getting late, so he thought, why wait? He could save some time later by mixing the paint now. A quick fix and let the play out. He got what he needed for a mixed media piece: acrylics, oils, spirits, palettes, canvas, aerosols and synthetic brushes. Relaxed but rushing, he grabbed his easel and mask and, like all people who make art, started and then became part of it. first, Nick tried his best not to ingest. His instinct to dip his finger in, but his brain protested. It was a shame, but the best thing. Although, thought Nick, he couldn't sell it untested, so he detuned his higher brain capacity and consumed the painted canvas hungrily. Still painting, still functioning. In a trance of colours, light and smoke, as brush made stroke, he broke through the coke hue. Using orange and blue, that which began as an idea began to come true. The old canvas reborn anew. With no distractions, time became abstract. Nick's mind impacted by frenzied thoughts flashing through the empty void. Music, noise, dance, trance, lights, writing, blurred excitement. An image creeping into sight. Yeah, no life, the highest heights, the sky, the space, no time, no place, no mindful waste. The thrill, the fear, more, ceiling, walls, floor. Nick had never been more alive than that moment before he died. He lay lifeless on his back, fade to black.